Okay, I'm going to try to do a quick video on the basics of writing a scientific paper. There will be a rubric and some more written details on Carmen if you prefer to do that. The website that I have up right now is actually a pretty good website explaining in how to write a paper. Scientific writing is very different from other forms of writing. And for me, I tend not to write the paper in the order of title through discussion. So I am going to take you through this video in the order that I like to write a paper. This is not the only way that you can do this. Certainly you can write the paper in any order that you see fit. This paper will be written in sentences. It needs to have a title. It needs to have the different sections outlined. So when you start your introduction, you're going to have the term introduction there. However, I always start with the materials and methods. So the materials and methods is going to be, you're going back to the papers that we gave out on the directions for setting up the assignments or the experiments. And you simply write out in complete sentences exactly what you did. And you want to write it out in a way that somebody else who knew nothing about your experiment could come back and follow what you did and set it up exactly. You want to try to eliminate words like you and I or we and replace them with words like the researchers, or even simply eliminating that entirely. So you could say things like, here's an example down here at the bottom. And I don't expect you necessarily to understand these words, but that's okay. Chromosomal DNA was denatured for the first cycle by incubating the slides in 70% deionized formamide. So you can see that's a very specific example. So you want to list out exactly what the plants were, the numbers of seeds, and if you ended up with one or more, more seeds or less seeds than was in the directions, just go with what's in the directions. So you want to be as specific as you possibly can. Use those directions and reference back to those. Don't just copy and bullet paste those in there. You want to write that out in complete sentences. So I always start with that. The next section that I go to is going to be the results section, because this is exactly what happened. This could be a fairly short section, actually, maybe a paragraph or two, maybe some pictures and a paragraph. You want to exactly write out what happened. So if you have a chart or a graph, you can put that in, showing the increase in growth, for example, in the zinnias or the marigolds. You could have pictures, beginning and ending pictures if you wanted to do that, or you could simply write it out by hand. So you want to make sure that this is only what happened. This is not why it happened. This is just what happened. Right? So it's usually a fairly short section. And again, it's not I saw, we saw, you saw. It is just the plants grew. The first week that I noticed germination, you can't see, I said I. The first week germination was noticed was week 2. The plants seemed to grow fairly evenly at that point, and by the end of the experiment, the plants were 4 weeks tall. The plants in the combined pots were 2 inches shorter than the plants in the species-only pots. Something along those lines. Doesn't have to be very detailed. It just has to give you enough information about the observations that you had and the end results. So that's always the part that I go to next, is the results. Then I'll usually write my title. And the title needs to be pretty specific. So, for example, if you're doing the underwear one, it could be observations of decomposition of cotton underwear in 2 different soil types. If you're doing the seed bank one, it could be observations of the numbers of weeds growing in different soil types. So it does, these are not cutesy, these are not, I don't want to say they're not interesting, but basically they're not interesting. What you really are trying to do is give a search engine the ability to discover this article. If that's what you're going to do, is publish it someplace. The next thing that I would probably write then is going to be my discussion. And this is going to be the one area that you can kind of put in a little bit of we or I. You still want to avoid you, but you can do a little bit of we or I. Rather than saying it was noticed, you could say the researchers noticed, you could say we noticed, and this is where you're going to make guesses as to why you think you got the results that you got. So if you're looking at the underwear study, you might say the decomposition in the organic field was 60% and the decomposition in the conventional field was 40%. Why do you think that is? So you might add that as farming practices on a conventional field would have less compaction because you don't need to drive over it as much, or you might look at it as it's possible that the amount of organic matter contributed to the amount of weed growth. You might look at it as the cultivation practices and or the pesticide practices, anything that you might think could contribute it to the differences that you see there. And this is why you think you got the results that you got. Then I'm going to go to an introduction, and that is where you sketch out the background of your study. Why are you investigating this? Not just because somebody said at school you have to. What is the importance of this? Why it is important for people to understand that a soil that looks empty with no growth in it actually has microorganisms in it, or actually has seeds in the seed bank. Why is it important to understand that when you grow plants in containers, you are going to have competition, just in the same way that plants in the field are going to have competition? One of the things that you'll need to do for this is look up online some other resources, 2 references that you'll need for this. In other words, what have other people done in the area of seed banks? You can definitely use Google for this. And then you want to use in-text citations. This might be a couple of paragraphs where you're explaining what other people have done and why your study is important and what you think the results are going to be. And then finally, you write the abstract. This is a summary of the entire article. So it may be about, this page here says 100 words. Usually you can go up to about 250 words. A couple of sentences of why it's important, what you did, the results that you got, and why you think you got those results. So no more than a paragraph on this. So if we go back through the various areas to give you an idea of length, the title is really just that, a sentence. Your abstract is no more than a paragraph, 200 to 250 words. Your introduction might be anywhere from 2 to 4 paragraphs. That's about it. Your materials and methods is probably only going to be 1 or 2 paragraphs total. Your results will probably be 1 or 2 written paragraphs and maybe a chart or a graph or a couple of pictures. And your discussion, again, 1 or 2 paragraphs. So historically, in terms of length, these have probably been anywhere between 2 to 4 pages, maybe 5 pages if you include pictures and a bibliography at the end. Again, I'm going to put some written stuff on Carmen for you guys, so you should be able to go back through and see this.